Welcome back to the Three Rivers Challenge, and where we're using our pantry items for the month of January and February. Today we are starting out breakfast right by making waffles, which is one of my daughter's favorite meals. This is a plant-based waffle, but you can mix it up and change it into whatever you want. This recipe is really easy with really simple pantry items. So we're using almond milk in this recipe. We find that having a thinner milk works really well. We've tried soy milks, and they're just a little bit too thick for this recipe. Using rice milk would work as well. Then it's just your simple staples of flour. You can choose to use whole wheat, or we use all-purpose flour. Then you have some sugar, a little bit of salt, some nuts. We like to use cashews just because they have a nicer flavor and they have a lot more creamy consistency. And then choosing an oil, I use grapeseed oil just in this instance for like a little bit more sweeter and bland oil for this recipe. And then you need a really good blender, in which case we have the Vitamix. And that is how simple it is. We're just mixing all the ingredients and blending them, and then we're going to make our waffles with a waffle iron. And then while that is cooking up all those waffles, then we'll be making the other things we're going to be having for breakfast as well. This day we actually have a ton of eggs. I want to say about 90. Our chickens are flourishing with eggs right now. It's interesting that sometimes in the winter they lay better than they do in the summer. But anyways, we have a ton of eggs, so we decided to have scrambled eggs for breakfast. As you can see, this recipe makes a lot of waffles, and they're really great if you have leftover waffles for freezing. They freeze really well. Just pop them into a toaster oven or a toaster, and they are ready for another day. So this is our meal for breakfast. For dinner, we're deciding to do a pizza dough. As I mentioned in our last video, when we did naan bread pizza, we saved our sauce for real pizza that we made from scratch. This is it. It's one of our go-to recipes that we got offline, and we use it quite regularly. My husband does say that it is a little bit of a bread-like consistency crust, but I don't seem to mind it. So here we're just blooming our yeast and getting it frothy, and we'll be adding it into our dry mix mixture. So now we're just adding the other easy pantry staples. Of course, I'm using all-purpose flour for this, and I added to Hannah and I's pizza, as I'm making two different pizzas, I'm adding some whole wheat to ours as well. So you just want to add your flours and your salt, and we added some garlic powder, oregano, and then we're adding our yeast bloom to this and mixing it up. Very simple again, and then we're going to be adding some oil, and that is how easy it is. And then we just need to let the dough rise for a couple of hours. We really like this recipe specifically because there's a nice flavor to it when you're adding some herbs and some garlic powder. It's just not a plain dough. It's got some flavor to it, and we do like that. It also freezes really well. So we just add our toppings, we cook it, and then whatever's left over we put in the freezer, and we just take it out again and put it in the oven when we're ready to use it. For people that like a ready to go thing, you can actually make this ahead and have it available for other days that you might not have the time to make something. So we're just using regular pizza sauce in this recipe. You can make your own homemade pizza sauce. I didn't do that this year. Something that I will try to do in the next little bit, but as for right now, this is just a regular store-bought pizza sauce. We don't like a whole lot of sauce on our pizza, so that's one thing about making your own homemade pizza. You get the right ingredients and you get the right amount. And in this instance, just because we can have dairy, we've got some Deo cheese in this. You can get different types of cheese, and yes, we are pineapple people. Pineapple on pizza. I know I'm going to hear a lot of comments on not having pineapple on our pizza, but that's how we like it. Also, normally I would add mushrooms, but I didn't have any mushrooms at the time. Oh, and there you have it, ready to go. Lots to put in the freezer as well. So our pizza's ready, and we're just going to be making up a little bit of a salad to go with our pizza, and that is dinner. The next thing I decided to do, since we had apples that we had put away into the freezer, was to make some apple crisp. Really easy to do. Again, using up some of those staples that we always have on hand. Some flour, some oats, a little bit of sugar, some cinnamon. I like to sometimes put raisins in mine, but I decided not to at this point, especially since I've already got the oven on. I tend to, when I'm using the oven, try to put as much stuff as I can in at one time and do every little bit of baking that I can do while the oven is going and it's already preheated. So this will be for dessert. And when I'm done making my apple sauces or my apple butters and things like that with the leftover apples, or when I get tired of doing apples, I generally just either put them in the dehydrator or freezer. But having some apples in the freezer are really great for doing up something like this, a nice dessert, or putting them in your smoothie. Next thing we're going to be doing is another meal. This is just kind of a side dish. This is going to be a bean casserole. So in this recipe, I will be using beans from the garden that we froze. But I did have to go out and I did purchase the mushrooms because I don't grow my own mushrooms. So again, we're just making up some mushrooms, some onion, and we're just going to be sauteing them just for a beautiful flavor for a sauce to go over the beans. And we've got some garlic, which actually did come from the garden. We've got lots of garlic still going strong. So I'll be adding a couple of cloves to this just for some extra flavor. So once they add the garlic, we'll just add a little bit of salt and a little bit of nutritional yeast, which gives it a little bit of a creamy kind of cheesy flavor. And nutritional yeast has a high amount of vitamin B12. We're also going to be adding some paprika and some Bragg's liquid soy seasoning to this before we get it sauteed and get all those flours mixed in. Oh, and then we've got some dehydrated parsley, which came from the garden. We have lots of parsley left over from the garden. So adding it to just about every meal, it's high in vitamin C, so it's very nutritious. Using up some of those herbs that we've grown over the past year in the garden. We basically just want to get them cooked enough, just browned up, kind of a flavor flowing. Well, we're going to be adding some of this into our Vitamix blender. So you want to take about half of this mixture and we're going to blend it, and we're going to be blending it with some soy milk. So you want a milk that has no extra flavorings like vanilla or anything like that. And I actually got this recipe from someone online, so it's not my original recipe. And we're just going to be mixing all of this up, and then we're going to be adding it back into the saucepan and mixing it in with the mixture of onions and mushrooms. So just adding a little bit more milk just to get it a little bit thinner because I found it to be a little bit too thick. And when you're reheating this, you don't want to actually cook it to boil. You just want the flavors to kind of blend in with each other. Then we've got a couple packages of our beans from the garden. And you might be wondering, they don't look quite like the beans I'm used to growing, but we grow a lot of the Royal Burgundy bush beans. So there's some purple beans in amongst our green beans with this. And we're just going to be just allowing them to thaw just a little bit because as you can see, they are quite frozen. And we're just going to be adding our sauce on top of that. And then we're just going to bake it. And you want to bake it about 350 for about 25 to 35 minutes. And it's breakfast again. So today's breakfast, we've actually decided to do smoothies just because we have so much fruit that we put away from the gardens. The blackberries, actually, we went picking in the Crown Land and picked a bunch of blackberries that we put away in the freezer. We did that with a friend from actually Hidden Blessings Homestead. So they are just from August this year. And the raspberries are from our garden as well. We had a lot of raspberries, so we want to get using some of that up so we're ready for next year's garden berry harvest. And we've got some apples. I'm just going to add a few to this mixture. We've got some soy milk added to here. And then I have some protein powder that we got from Costco. We'll be adding to this so that we've got some protein in our smoothie. Having this Vitamix has been really handy over the years. We've had it a long time. When Hannah was a baby, we used it quite a bit in making her own baby food. And the smoothies turned out really great in this as well. So you can add frozen bananas as well. I just didn't have that at the moment, just to make it a little bit thicker, and no sweeteners added to this one, and it was just sweet enough. To go with our smoothies today, Hannah has decided to have some fried eggs, and we are pulling some of the waffles out of the freezer that we made the other day. One way that I like to have my waffles is with peanut butter and some apple butter on it, or applesauce works fine too, whichever you have. I do that because I find when they come out of the freezer and you toast them up, they're a little bit too crunchy for me. They're still delicious, but I love to eat them this way. And it uses up some of those nice apple sauces that we've put away for the pantry. And it's a great way of getting that into our diet. Peanut butter. Looks so yummy. It is. It's really delicious. And Hannah's going to be having some maple syrup. Now I know it says Kirkland, but we actually kept the bottle. We generally buy maple syrup in bulk, usually buy about a 4-liter bottle, and then we just take what we need and put it in the fridge. So for dinner for this day, we've decided to do a fettuccine Alfredo, a plant-based one, and it is looking delicious. So this is another staple thing that we have. Basically in this sauce, we have some flour, some cashews, just a few different ingredients, lots of garlic from the garden, and we've got parsley from the garden, dehydrated of course, and we're just mixing that up, thickening it up. And then we've got baked beans just out of a can, beans in tomato sauce. And once the spaghetti was done, because we didn't have the fettuccine noodles, and then we just put the sauce on top of the noodles, mix it in really well. As you can see, it came out really creamy and it turned out delicious. Even my husband said it tasted delicious. Who knew? So it's looking really creamy. It looks delicious. The only thing this meal is missing is some garlic bread. So we've just made up a little salad just to have on the side of our noodles. So that's our meal for today. We've got our fettuccine noodles, we've got our salad for our greens, and we've got our beans for a protein. So a full meal for dinner, and it was delicious. And it's bread day. We have a lot of our sourdough starter, so we are going to be making some bread, and we're running low on it anyways. So this bread is really simple to make. I've made it by hand for years, but I've found that my hands tend to get quite sore. So I have this wonderful KitchenAid mixer that does a lot of the work for me, and I can just do the last few steps on my own by hand. Really simple to make. It is one of our favorite breads to make. We just like to mix whole wheat flour with our all-purpose flour to get this bread. I do actually have a video on the recipe of this bread and how to make it. So I'll put a link there for you to go check out how to make this delicious sourdough starter bread, or if you want to call it natural leavening bread. So I just need to let it rise for a bit after we've kneaded it. So I like to do the kneading just by hand, just to get it to the right consistency that I like it. Sometimes I found that you can add a little bit too much flour and it gets too thick, and that you can also make it too sticky. So I like to just do the last part on my own by hand, so I can just feel that it's the right consistency that I want our bread to be. I want to say that we make bread about once a week or once every 2 weeks. We also like doing a raisin bread as well. This recipe works really well for that. We have some new loaf pans I'm trying out. I have to say, after using them, I decided that they weren't really for me. I didn't like them. So I'm going to go back to my traditional glass loaf pans. So I was always intimidated by bread making at the beginning, but I've come to quite enjoy it and I believe, getting quite good at it. But making your own homemade bread is a lot cheaper, as well as you know the ingredients that you're putting into the bread. And so you know what you're going to be eating and feeding your family. So as I'm getting the bread in the oven, you can see that I've got some baked potatoes going in there for dinner. As I said, I try to use up whatever I can, whether we have them tonight for dinner or another day reheated, or for home fries another day. I just try to use up the oven while it's going. A nice good loaf of bread right out of the oven. What gets better than that? And like I've said before, once the oven is going, I always try and do as much as I can when the oven is on and going. So we decided to make some cookies for dessert. Homemade delicious cookies, and they turned out excellent. So happy with them.